Itch it up, my selector.
Due to some violent content, parental discretion is advised.
I know you're gonna dig this.
The Maestro.
Fist hits the bag, 1, 2, and comes back. Single fist here. You hear that beat?
Think outside the box, and VO Xing on top of them, clocking them, send them back to the corner for oxygen.
Yes.
Golden gloves, I know
Just
myself, I know
rolling.
the game, it's not a game, I know the ring, I want the belt. Finding the rhythm to hit them, split them and touch them and tip them, hit that six pack with that quick jab. Uppercut the bro, making them fall down, break them all down, switch stands, tippy toe, in the hands, give them some more. You are not Muhammad Ali, anomaly, a Mayweather, Pacquiao, prodigy in the midst of fist to this, just S2, hot to rock, think out the box, you know I got the rock, speed back.
That would be a little round.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. Evening out here in New York City. Afternoon if you're out there on the West Coast in California, and definitely nighttime if you're one of our subscribers from the UK. I'm here with Mr. Joe Habib from Ringside Reporter. Most of you guys are subbed to him. If you're not, make sure you check him out and subscribe and like all of his content. He's one of the best guys out there talking boxing. Thank you, everybody. This is Maestro Boxing, Amílcar here. And look, I've been a fan of the guest that we're about to bring on for a very long time. I'm going to get into that a little bit. Mr. Joe Habib is also a fan of this acclaimed comedian, a member of the, I would call radical left, one of the biggest truth tellers out there on the internet. I want to welcome Mr. Jimmy Dore, someone who I consider to be a true hero here in the United States. One of the few truth tellers out there. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for appreciating a guy who sticks his chin out to go against the established narrative. That's basically the nuts and bolts of my show. That's my wheelhouse. Is whatever the status quo is, I find holes in it and I poke them.
Absolutely. And look, I'm a teacher, a union member. Joe Habib is a civil servant up there in Massachusetts, union member as well. And look, working class people who have connected over the sport of boxing, one of the, I consider the, meritocracies and really a sport that has connected people all over the world. I think a lot of people can connect to your message and to what you're all about and what you talk about. And I'll briefly describe how I got into watching your shows. I was much younger. I was a college student, and I was a follower of the Young Turks, a news outlet that, if I say has let me down, I would be under what happened. They were very critical of George Bush. Not so critical of Obama, unfortunately, and then went absolutely apeshit crazy under Donald Trump's presidency, and I mean, essentially exposed themselves as total frauds. I've later, through your channel and through watching you, Jimmy, have now had to disassociate myself with other people. I've got no shame in saying I used to be a loyal follower and subscriber of Kyle Kalinske, Secular Talk. He has proven himself to be far from what you are. And honestly, Crystal and Saga, especially Crystal, has let me down as well. So look, when it comes to news, this guys is who I get my shit from more than anything. I've got my wife into them and many of my coworkers. Joe, what are your thoughts on our guests before we start asking them some questions?
Well, I have to be honest with Jimmy. When I first started watching him, I wasn't always on board with all of his his ideology, basically. But I loved his rants. So from the entertainment aspect, I just would watch him, listening to his rants. But then I started listening to him speak, and he convinced me on some things, and he made me think and second guess my viewpoints on certain topics. So that's why I started listening to him more. and I agree with him on a lot of things. Obviously, you can't agree with someone on everything, but he's very compelling. You know, I like the fact that he's not part of a tribe. You know, he takes every issue and just has an opinion on that issue, and he's not on, you know, whether it's the popular issue or the non-popular issue, he's just willing to put his take out there, and he's not trying to please anybody. Like he says, he's anti-establishment, and I can respect that.
I think you're muted. You guys are muted.
Oh, sorry.
he's
I
muted.
was saying that I wasn't surprised, Jimmy, when I first heard that you were a fan of boxing. You know, I actually found out about that through watching you on Joe Rogan's show, and you had mentioned some fights. But I'm like, this makes total sense. You know, he's the fighter for the working class. He's a fighter for truth. It absolutely makes sense that it'd be into what I consider to be one of the most honest endeavors, which is two men duking it out, two gloves on, settling the score in the middle of a square. You know, that's where the truth is often told. We get to find out who's better and who's worse. We get to find out who's skilled and who isn't. We get to find out who's tough and who's not. So, Jimmy, I'd like you just to talk about your interest in boxing, maybe, you know, who you grew up watching, you know, who you watch today, etc.
So, I mean, I think the reason why I like boxing so much is because it's very similar to stand-up comedy. When you're, you know, when I'm on stage as a stand-up comic, there's no hiding. I don't have any dancing girls. There's no light show. I'm not going to blow off any fireworks. There's no music. There's just me and my ideas, and that's it, you know? And so there's no hiding. And that's what I feel like boxing, you know, you reveal yourself. You can't help but reveal who you are. And that it's, there's no hiding in the boxing ring. If you're going to run, we're going to see that you ran, you know? So, and if you don't step up, we're going to see you didn't. That's why I think that's one thing about it that really appeals to me. There's no hiding, and you can't help but reveal who you are. And so, I mean, I guess like everybody else, I mean, Muhammad Ali was my all-time favorite boxer. You know, he's just, you know, not only that, just such a, you know, figure in the culture, and you know, his ability to articulate things. And even though he was, I think, you know, grew up illiterate, and he became this like poet. And so, I mean, he was just, you know, he was much bigger than boxing, Muhammad Ali. And so, you know, cats like that don't come along very often. So I really liked him. But then I got into boxing when I moved out to Los Angeles, and I stopped. I realized something about moving to Los Angeles made me realize that other sports were kind of silly in a sense, like, especially since they were all younger than me, you know, and it just felt weird. And watching all these guys younger than me who were rich. And I was out here struggling as a comedian, trying to get it. Just, I just couldn't get into it anymore. And but so, and that's when a friend of mine was really into boxing, who was a comedian, and at the time, I think now he's just a writer. And he really, you know, once you know the backstory behind a fighter, it makes the fight so much more compelling. And so once I got to know some of the backstory about, and, you know, there's most of them, a lot of them are tragic, you know, and so they've overcome so much in their life already. And so that's what it kind of appealed to me. And then I started watching, and Roy Jones Jr. was at the top of his game then. And he, you know, he's quite a, you know, he was the kind of boxer I wanted. Yeah, I wanted to be the kind of comedian that he was as a boxer. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know, he was sure of himself, and he was entertaining as all hell. And you know, he wanted, you know, like when I would go up on stage, like when I would, so that at that time in my career, I just started headlining, getting on television. I'd been on maybe NBC, maybe a half a dozen times. And I was just starting to get noticed a little, but I could still. So when I would go out, I would open for bigger names. Like I remember I was opening for David Tell, and it was it was like I couldn't wait to get out there because I knew I had a pocket full of bullets in my back pocket, and they're not going to see him coming, and they don't think I'm going to be funny, and I just couldn't wait to surprise a crowd, and like I knew what I had in my back pocket. I had my act. I had it down pretty good, and I couldn't wait to unleash it. And that's kind of like what Roy Jones Jr. was like. I got these skills, and I want to go show everybody. And so I don't know. I think that was my connection to Roy Jones Jr. And from there, it was just I was in. And now the problem is, I work nights, so it's hard to catch the boxing. And hey, why isn't Canelo Plant's going to be on DAZN? I thought Canelo had a deal with DAZN.
That's a good question.
He's a free agent now, so he can market himself to go on any network. So he went to the highest.
When did that happen? I mean, the whole reason I got DAZN on my phone was because of Canelo.
Yeah.
They restructured his deal, and then he ended up they ended up kind of settling out of that deal because they were in litigation because they wanted to pay him less money than they originally agreed to because his promoter at the time, Golden Boy Promotions, didn't tell him the whole terms of the contract, and then he ended up suing his promoter, and then he was kind of countersuing them, but then he settled with them and he split with his promoter. So now he can go on a fight-to-fight basis with them. So you'll probably see him back on there, but for this particular event, Showtime, they outbidded DAZN, so that's why it's on Showtime. It kind of sucks that it's on pay-per-view though.
Yeah, as Virtuoso says in the chat, it's a long story, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's a long story.
When he signed that huge deal, the 360 million plus deal with Golden Boy, it tied him to DAZN. He got upset with Oscar De La Hoya because behind the scenes, Oscar De La Hoya was promising DAZN a fight with Triple G, and he had no interest in taking on Triple G. There's some backstory there. Triple G accused him of being a drug cheat, and he didn't want to give him a third fight. So he was upset by that. He got out of his deal with Oscar. He then went to DAZN on a fight-by-fight. And now he's fighting Caleb Plant on Showtime because Showtime's affiliated with Premier Boxing Champions who essentially manage Caleb Plant. Now, he did want this fight to be on DAZN, but Al Heyman, who advises Caleb Plant, and this is my understanding of it, didn't want the fight to take place on DAZN and wanted it under a platform that he's tied to. So because of that, it's on pay-per-view. We're going to have to pay $80 for it, something I'm not happy about. I'd much rather, I'm assuming you do too, prefer to pay $100 a year to get access to a lot of fights like you would movies on Netflix. So that's why I subscribe to DAZN. But the truth is we need more eyeballs in the sport of boxing, and I don't agree with the pay-per-view model. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Canelo and your views on him as we go into this big fight weekend?
He's really turned into a monster. I mean, he's got power, he's got speed, especially when he's heavier, right? He's as fast as those guys, and it seemed like this fight to me feels like when Canelo fought Mayweather, right? He wasn't ready, and Mayweather just outclassed him. I think that's the same thing with Plant versus Canelo. Like Canelo's just going to outclass this guy. And I think he'll probably knock him out. I mean, he's developed the one punch knockout power now, Canelo. I mean, he brings his power with him. I can't get over, how good he is. I think he's great for the sport. I like that he fights a lot. And, I would love to see him fucking beat Triple G for a third time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. People have called me a Triple G hater because I consider him to be an overrated middleweight. His fans seem to believe that he's better than Bernard Hopkins, better than.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Hagler better than Monzon, and I'm just not.
Oh,
I'm just not having it. And his PR team is trying to make the case that he's got more legit title defenses at middleweight than those guys. I've said it, and people are like, "Oh, Maestro, you're crazy," but I think Kelly Pavlik and Jermaine Taylor beat him. I'm sorry, he came up in a very weak era of middleweights, and that's just my opinion on it. But yes, I'm with you on that one. And I'm also with you on the knockout. Joe's a gambling expert. He's laid out various scenarios of how to make money betting on this fight. Unfortunately, not a lot of them pay very much if you're putting money on Canelo, but it is what it is. I mean, the guy broke the orbital bone, the eye socket of his last opponent, Billy Joe Saunders. And I think Saunders is a much better fighter than this guy, Caleb Plant. He's also a southpaw, but at least as slick. So, I'm with you on the knockout.
Jimmy, who do you watch the fights with when these big events take place? Because it's hard sometimes to find a lot of people that are interested in the sport of boxing. Do you find it difficult to talk boxing with some of your friends? Or do you have a tight circle of people that you know that like the sport as well as you do?
Yeah, but basically nobody else follows boxing. Steph and I watch it, and I got her to watch the De La Hoya Mayorga fight, and that was she hated him sufficiently, so that was very exciting fight because we didn't know, then that was so much fun. So yeah, a lot of times Steph will watch it with me, but she can only watch one fight because she can't take the brutality, so she'll only watch the main fight. She doesn't like undercards and shit. I like to watch if I have time, but again, like tomorrow night, I'm not going to be able to watch the fight. I'm going to be in Baltimore doing a show. Wow. So it's very unfortunate. And so that's why I was hoping it was on DAZN, so maybe I could catch some of it on my phone in the green room. But I don't know about how to catch Showtime on my freaking phone. I got some fights 2 weeks ago, I think, maybe on my phone. A Fox Sports has an app.
Showtime has an app too. Showtime has an app too, so you may be able to get it off the app.
Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll email Steph some options after the show.
Let me ask you. Go ahead, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
Well, the story I tell about when I tried to get Steph into boxing, I'm like, well, maybe if she goes to a live event, she'll feel the drama more. And so we went to the club, and the guys come out and they start fighting, and I look over and she's doing this, and I go, Steph, you got to look up. And she looks up, she goes, use your words.
Well, your wife Steph comes out of the same profession that I do, right? Teaching.
Oh, right. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So, that's all what it's about. You got to use your words in that domain. But we're talking about the fight game right now. Joe?
Jimmy, I like how you compared comedy to boxing. And just like when boxers are off for a long time, they get rusty. Obviously you had to deal with the pandemic and you couldn't do your show, as obviously, right? So did it take you time to get back into the swing and feel comfortable again in front of a live audience? Do you feel as though if you're not doing it enough that you can get rusty as well?
Yes, no doubt about it. You get rusty right away. I remember Jerry Seinfeld he said, if I don't do jokes, if I don't do comedy for a couple of nights, I'm okay. But if I don't do comedy for like 5 nights, I notice. And if I don't do comedy for a week, they notice. And so I think I could be butchering that, but it's a very short amount of time. It's not a lot of time. And you start to lose it, and you lose. But what I lost more than anything was my confidence. And
really, wow.
If you lose your confidence, you're dead. And so there was, this happened to me right before COVID, actually. I wasn't going out enough. I wasn't doing enough stand-up. When I would tour, I would just do live Jimmy Dore shows, which is much different than doing stand-up. And so I kind of lost, I wasn't myself. I wasn't 100%. I was second guessing. You always second guess yourself to a certain extent, but I certainly didn't have that Roy Jones Jr. swagger that I find I need to be funny. And so then when COVID happened, I couldn't wait to get back out there. And so I've kind of hit it extra hard since COVID as far as stand-up goes. And now when I tour, I'm not doing live Jimmy Dore shows on the road. I'm touring as a stand-up. And so I'm doing way more hours of stand-up. So I'm getting my confidence back, and I feel like I have that same kind of mojo I had when I did my last special or the Citizen Jimmy one. I really feel at a high level when I get close to doing a special. And as far as confidence and swagger, and so I feel like I'm there again as a stand-up. It's really exciting.
You did Just for Laughs, right, Jimmy, in Montreal?
I've done Just for Laughs a couple of times, at least 2 times, maybe 3.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stand-up that you're talking about, not the show like that I went to where you had your presentations up. And
right.
It was really funny, and there was a lot of back and forth with the audience. But what you're doing right now on tour is a straight stand-up, like we saw in the Comedy Central special or the Just for Laughs festivals, right?
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to see that.
So I come out, Steph comes out, and she does about 15 minutes, and then I'll come out and do about an hour.
Oh.
And and then we usually have a guest. So we'll have a special guest. So it's usually around an hour and a half show. So I've been really, and then we've been doing this theater here in Los Angeles near our house in Studio City called Two Roads Theater. And it's right across the street from where Robert Blake killed his wife. And that's how I know it. And so we've been doing that on Fridays a lot. And I get to do an hour in town in Los Angeles, which is rare. Because when you go to the comedy clubs, you get to do 10 or 15 minutes, and that's about it. And so I have this luxury of being able to sell tickets at this theater. So I've been doing that a lot. So yeah, it's just about, I'm really excited. I feel great. I'm trying to think of when it'll be ready to drop a new special. Hopefully, probably next spring.
Well, hopefully you can do it here in New York so I can check it out with my wife and with some friends that are now big fans of yours as I am. Before I get to some other questions that are not boxing related, I do have one question from the chat that I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask you this first. If there's anybody else that's on your radar right now as a fighter that you enjoy watching or that you think other people should check out.
I'm so bad with names. What is that kid's name?
Teofimo Lopez.
That's the guy. I love that guy. Yeah, so he's my new favorite.
Oh,
yeah. So I wish he would fight. I wish fighters would fight more often. And so yeah, but yeah, he's fun. He's exciting, fun. Yeah. Right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Unified champion at 135 pounds, lightweight. Unfortunately, hasn't fought for over a year.
See?
We're going to get into this topic later because I want to talk about mandates and their effects on pro sports and on kind of athletes and stuff. But yeah, he caught COVID. He was blamed for it because he didn't take the vaccine, which is something I'm going to bring up later. I got another question. This is coming from a union person and myself, and Joe's in the union too. Whether you believe that combat sports athletes should seek to unionize.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you could find a way to do it, yeah. I mean, they have professional sports unions in every other sport. Why not? I mean, I guess except for boxing's not. There's no union in boxing, right?
No, there isn't. I think that there should be. They pay all kind of fees to sanctioning bodies for rankings and for titles. I mean, they should be paying into something that's more beneficial to them. And by that, I mean fighters. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's it for me on the boxing stuff. Before we get into some of the other questions, I'd like to ask Jimmy.
Can I just say, I always think it's funny when you'll see funny, it's kind of tragically funny that when you see there's going to be a vote at this Nissan plant in Alabama to see if they're going to unionize, and it's really close. I'm like, really? You are such a little cog in a fucking huge wheel, and you don't think you need a union? Guess who thinks he needs a union? LeBron James needs a union. You don't think you need a union? A pilot needs a union. You don't think you need a union? Of course you need a fucking union. I just don't. So, we just have such shit union leaders and bad communicators. And, you know, of course, the propaganda is overwhelming in the power of the, and that's why we get to you know, you should be against these mandates just on a worker's perspective. I will talk about it when we get there, but Jesus.
Yeah, the crazy thing too about unions, because I was in management for a great portion of my life too. And I remember companies would just have meetings on how we're going to be against these unions, how we're not going to allow our workers to unionize. They would have specific meetings for that. And I always used to say to myself, what are they so afraid of? If you're a good company and you're a good employer, then why would you be afraid of a union unless you wanted to do something that was wrong to the employees? And I've always been pro-union, even when I was on the other side, but I could never say that, obviously, because again, if you're doing the right thing, what's there to be afraid of? Unless you don't want to do the right thing.
Yeah. And go ahead, Jimmy.
No, and we live, you know, we live in a system. We don't live in a market economy anymore. You know, we live in I saw an economist refer to like what happens at Amazon. That's not a market. That's a system. And, you know, it's worse than the feudal systems of old, because Jeff Bezos controls everything, controls what you see, what you get to see, what you get to buy, what you get. And there's an algorithm that does that all for you. And he can bury something if he wants. It's just, and so the only thing you have is the union to fight back. I can't believe that Amazon isn't unionized. It's just a mind blower.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to say as a teacher is that, and I'm sure Joe will agree, that once you're in a union, you also have to push the union to do the right thing and elect actual militant union people. Otherwise, you end up as a system where you've got Randy Weingarten as the head of teacher representation in the whole country, which is not in itself, I think, a very good thing.
Randy Weingarten is an example of a corrupt anti-union union leader. She supports fucking charter schools.
Absolutely. And there's nothing more, I would say, sinister than a charter school. It's literally a virus that infects the public school cell and weakens it, and it with the intention of eventually destroying it. It's terrible, and it's something that was opened up here in New York City with Mayor Bloomberg. And once that Pandora's box is open, it's very difficult to close it. And it's a long fight for us here, but it's one that we really have to keep moving on. Look, I saw some chatter in our chat, and I want to address this generally before we go on to the vaccine stuff, because I personally get it all the time. If I criticize one side, I'm automatically accused of being in favor of the other. And I think that if you're going to criticize anybody, you should be criticizing the people that supposedly have been elected to represent you and to represent your interests. So, you know, in my case, I've been very critical of AOC, who represents the Bronx where I live. I've been very critical of everyone in the squad, Jayapal, Ilhan Omar, you name it, because they are the people who are supposed to be pushing the interests of the working class to the forefront, pushing an anti-war message to the forefront, pushing an anti-corruption, anti-corporate message to the forefront. And when I see them bending the knee, why exactly should I be criticizing Republicans? Jimmy, I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
So I get that all the time. Jimmy, why don't you criticize the Republicans? You only criticize the Democrats. Because I didn't help the Republicans get elected. That's why. The Republicans didn't betray me. I know exactly who the Republicans are. They're a corporate right-wing party. I got it. What the Democrats claim to be is a left-wing worker party. They're not. So they're supposed to be the people who represent me, and they're not. And so I think it's my greater mission to disabuse people of that phony notion that we have a two-party system in this country. And the best way to do that is to point out that the Democrats aren't Democrats. The Republicans are fucking Republicans, but the Democrats aren't Democrats. They're also Republicans. And so I guess what I'm doing is I'm criticizing the corporate party, and because there's only one party, they both serve the same people. Joe Biden serves the same people Donald Trump did, which is the billionaire donor class. And that's my response. And as Chomsky said, you have he has the responsibility to try to influence the government that he has the most influence on. He criticizes the government that he has the influence on, which is the United States government. And so I go after the people who I have the most influence on, the people on the supposed left. And so, it's been my job to point out how they've been selling you out, how we don't, even people who claim to take no corporate money and claim to run against the establishment Democrats when they get elected inside the Democratic Party, immediately start doing the bidding of the establishment Democrats, even when the establishment Democrats don't live up to their own campaign promises. It would be one thing if the squad and the progressives in Congress were holding Joe Biden to his word on a $15 minimum wage and a public option. Those would be two huge things. They're not even doing that. So they're not even giving us the shit Joe Biden ran on. And that's the problem in the country, isn't that we have a right-wing corporate party. We always knew we were going to have one of those. The problem is there is no opposition party. And that's what the role of the Jimmy Dore Show is, to point that out and try to disabuse people of that phony notion that we have the two parties and that the Democrats are fighting for you. And that's why I've often said it actually does more damage to have people like AOC and the rest of the squad inside the Democratic Party, because it gives people the false notion that there's someone inside the Democratic Party that's actually fighting for you, and there isn't. And so imagine if they were in a third party, whatever it was, whether it was just the Justice Party, and now they would use their leverage. But because they're inside the Democratic Party, they never use their leverage. Right wingers do it all the time, right? The Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus drove John Boehner so crazy, he retired. And now he's selling pot. So that's what you can do if you use your leverage and you stick to your principles. And they got things done. So the Democrats never do that. So that's why I spend 95% of my time focused on the Democratic Party.
I'm glad you clarified that. And I will say, though, while you quoted Chomsky or paraphrased Chomsky, to me, that's the pre-COVID, pre-isolation Chomsky.
Yes, that's right.
This new Chomsky that I've been seeing recently, I mean, he's unrecognizable to the Chomsky that I read in college. Although he has been pushing the lesser of two evil arguments for quite a while, he's gone off a cliff recently, and I quite honestly don't really understand it. And what I will say is this, speaking to you as a millennial Black person whose family is from Central America, Latin America, originally, I take a lot of heat when I criticize Obama, a guy who I consider a war criminal, a guy who kind of reinvented imperialism and warfare with his drone wars, not to mention the amount of my people, specifically people from south of the border, that he exported us more than the Bush did, or I should say deported us more than Bush did. But yeah, you can tell I'm on the same page with you, Jimmy, on a lot of this stuff.
So what people don't realize is that Barack Obama is a big Trojan horse, right? Because you think, wow, there's, this African American wouldn't also be a tool of Wall Street. Yes, that's why he was allowed to become president, because he was a tool of Wall Street. He got, as WikiLeaks revealed, which is why they want to kill him, is that his entire cabinet was chosen from Citigroup. There was an email, and they laid out all the people they wanted to see in the Barack Obama administration, and every one of those people made it in the Barack Obama's administration. Literally came. Well, he picked Eric Holder. not because he wanted him to prosecute the banks, because Eric Holder was going to defend the banks and shield them from any scrutiny and prosecution. Why? Because we have corporate capture of our fucking government, and it's captured by Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, big pharma, health insurance, and fossil fuels. Now Silicon Valley's also. So there you go. We are an oligarchy. The Princeton study proved that years ago, that if you're in the bottom 80% of wage earners or earners in this country, you have absolutely no influence. Your will is never reflected in legislation ever. So we live in a rapacious oligarchy, as Dylan Radigan said on our show. This is the only country that didn't give their workers a paycheck when they made them close their business down during COVID. So they didn't flatten the curve. They flattened the American worker, and they did it in a really punitive way. And then Joe Biden wouldn't even give them the $2,000 he promised them, as if it was coming out of his goddamn pocket. I don't get that. Well, I get that because Joe Biden's doing the bidding of his donors. And he's no different. He's a right winger. That's the thing people don't understand. Joe Biden is not a left winger. Joe Biden is a right winger.
Well, he's the architect of 3 strikes and you're out. People tend to forget what he did to Anita Hill.
Yes.
People tend to forget that he was beating the war drums on behalf of the Democratic Party for the war in Iraq, and has essentially been in favor of every military escapade that this country's been involved in since he's been a senator. So, and not to mention the fact that he's a water boy. Shout out to Adam Sandler for the credit card industry that's based in his home state.
He made it illegal for you to get out of your student debt. He made it illegal for you to get out of your medical bankruptcy. I mean, that's the kind of asshole Joe Biden is, an enemy of the people, the architect of the for-profit prison system. And he bragged that his crime bill hung you for everything except jaywalking. This was the guy. I mean, he's the biggest. So this idea that you're going to get rid of racism under Trump and replace it with Joe Biden is hilarious. Joe Biden did more damage to black and brown people than fucking Donald Trump did. Barack Obama deported more Hispanics than all the presidents since 1890 combined. You know, Donald Trump deported almost half as less as in his first term as Obama did in his first term. I mean, as I predicted, by the way, on my show. And so this idea that you have to vote for Joe Biden because you care about immigrants is bullshit.
Settle down, Jimmy. Settle down. You're sounding like you support Donald Trump right now. Just let me.
No, I'm showing people that, of course, they're going to give you a guy like Barack Obama to do all the evil shit. Barack Obama did what he did when in a similar economic situation. He kicked 5.1 million families out of their house, didn't give them any relief whatsoever, gave them a right-wing healthcare plan anyway. We would have had that same healthcare plan had Mitt Romney won as the one because it's Romney Care. It's the one that the health insurance companies wanted. And you know how I know they wanted it? Because it's the day it passed, their stock went up 10%. That's how you know that this was a giveaway to the health insurance companies and big pharma. And that's all Barack Obama gave us. He opened up drilling everywhere. He repealed the restrictions against exporting fossil fuels, which is why there's fracking pipes underneath this fucking country from coast to coast. He bailed out a equity firm on the way out of and like late December on his way out of office. And what did that equity firm do? That equity firm was buying up all the rental property en masse. So that was also artificially inflating the rental prices and making it harder for first-time home buyers. That's his last thing he did as he left office. Barack Obama was no friend. By the way, what did he do to Occupy Wall Street? Nothing. What did he do with this movement of young people? Nothing. He opened the Arctic to drilling twice. I mean, the guy was a champion of Wall Street, the industry, the fossil fuels, big pharma, and the health. And that's who Barack Obama championed. There was no minimum raise increase. The income disparity fucking ballooned underneath him. Again, the wealth of black people shrunk under him because of the way he handled the Wall Street thing. That guy was no friend to the working man, just like Bill Clinton.
No, and you're absolutely right. And there's actually a pretty good show on Bill Clinton right now on FX about the whole Monica Lewinsky thing that I've been watching week to week. But 2 things before I transition to the vaccine. One is that, look, I've got 2 sisters that live north of the border. during the entire pandemic, they were getting checks for about $2,000 a month. You know, we're here begging for $2,000 once a year, if that. So that's number one. And the second thing I was going to say is that Black Lives Matter actually started when Barack Obama was president, and you know we can always go back to that interview with the people. You know, my brothers over there in Milwaukee in a barber shop, essentially explaining why they weren't going to go out to vote again.
That's right.
It's clear they've been let down. Nobody speaks to them. Now, I want to transition to the topic of the vaccine, which is something that you've been hitting home quite recently, because I generally, when I try to discuss this topic with people, I get labeled as something that I'm not, you know, and people don't really seem to have a firm grasp of the science of this. And it's something that you've covered really closely for the past few weeks on your channel, and I encourage everybody here to check it out. I want to go back to earlier in the year, and Joe Habib, you can fill in the gaps here. Tyson Fury, who I'm sure you know about, the Gypsy King from Manchester, heavyweight champion of the world, didn't take the second dose of the vaccine, and was encouraged. Was blamed for the fact that he caught COVID. Fast forward, you mentioned Teofimo Lopez Jr. He didn't take either dose of the vaccine, caught COVID. People were blaming him for the fact that he caught it and that, you know, millions of dollars were lost on his promotion. The science now, at least to me, and all of the documents that you've been talking about, I also follow the same doctor that you do out of the UK, the nursing professor, who's gone through these published documents, peer-reviewed documents, at great lengths, day after day, a week after week. The evidence is clear now. The vaccine does not prevent transmission. It does not prevent contraction. So I'd like generally your thoughts on this idea that professional athletes are responsible for catching this virus, for contracting COVID-19, the disease, and that the solution to all of this is to mandate that everybody, whether it's NBA players, and now you have promoters in boxing talking about boxers, mandating that they take the vaccine to prevent this. What are your thoughts on this, Jimmy?
So I have what people don't realize is that they're getting their information about COVID from big pharma sponsored news people, right? So now if I was getting $30 million a year from Pfizer, would you come to me for information about the vaccine or COVID or anything? You know, the person in charge of vaccines at the FDA resigned over the politicization of the booster shot. And so, and how much news did that get? None. And now that person's out of the way. So now we got rid of the squeaky wheel. The one person who will push back against the Biden administration's bullshit is now gone. And so there's a lot of facts, scientific facts about COVID and the vaccines that the mainstream news aren't telling you. In fact, what they're doing is just giving you a fear pandemic, right? So for instance, they won't tell you that no matter how many people get vaccinated, no matter how many masks you wear, every single person is going to get COVID. That's the joke. They keep pretending that, well, we have to have a mandate so everybody's vaccinated to protect each other. Well, wait a minute. If I'm vaccinated, that protects me from the virus, right? So you don't get vaccinated to protect someone else, because guess what? The results of the year-long study prove that the vaccines no longer protect you from transmitting the virus. The Delta variant, which is now the dominant variant, is not stopped by the vaccine. So they just did a year-long study in the Lancet, and it was published, and it said that people who are vaccinated are just as likely to spread the virus as people who are unvaccinated. So now what's your scientific basis for mandating other people get vaccinated? And you can just as easily get infected. So this idea that mandates are doing anything like protecting someone is bullshit. In fact, that article, that study, their conclusion was the reason why you should get vaccinated is to protect yourself. That's the only reason to get vaccinated now, is to protect yourself. So this idea that I have to get or someone has to get vaccinated to protect someone else is anti-science, not supported by the science anymore. So the mandates are fucking ridiculous. They make no sense. Plus, they go against what Professor Wolf. It goes against basic worker solidarity. And you should not be ever, as he said, that the people who ran this pandemic, we have the worst outcomes in the world, us in Brazil. And, 200,000 people would still be alive if we had a universal healthcare system. And so we have 200,000 extra people dead in the United States. That wouldn't be dead if we actually had a universal healthcare system like the rest of the Western world. But they're not going to give you that, are they? They're going to give you a fucking vaccine. So that's not about health, is it? If they really cared about your health, they'd give you fucking healthcare and they would have saved 200,000 more people's lives. But they didn't give you healthcare. They're giving you a vaccine, which is skyrocketing the profits of Big Pharma, which runs the news, which isn't telling you that everyone's going to get COVID, no matter how many people are vaccinated. And you know how I know that's true, that everybody's going to get COVID, no matter how many people are vaccinated? Because this guy said it. The COVID director, Biden's director of COVID response, Andy Slavitt. And this is his tweet. I'll show it to you. Hold on. Here we go. This is Andy Slavitt. He was Biden's director for COVID response. And if you see, can you read that?
Yes.
Read it out, Joe, if you can.
Given Delta's contagiousness and the fitness of future mutations, in order to beat it, this means that SARS-CoV will be contagious enough that everyone will get the virus.
That's
So
not me saying that. That's Biden.
And here's the thing, Jimmy.
Yes.
Just because not everyone gets the symptoms, obviously, that doesn't mean they don't have it, because it's going to affect everyone differently. Yeah.
But now even people like Bill Maher are pushing back, and I consider Bill Maher a right of center Democrat. And even Bill Maher is saying, it's like, hey, you're not following the science. I had COVID. By the way, he got over it without any problems. And they also tell you that 78% of the people who've died from go to the hospital from COVID are obese. They don't tell you that. They also don't tell you, the percentage of people who actually are hospitalized who contract COVID? 0.89% of people. So that's less than 1% of the people who get COVID have to go to the hospital. So I think we're overreacting to this. I'm vaccinated. I think Robert Malone, who invented the mRNA vaccine technology, no matter what the Atlantic says, no matter what a big pharma funded hit pieces say about him, he invented the mRNA vaccine technology. And he was on my show and he said, you can't vaccinate your way out of a pandemic like this, which is being proven by Israel, right? They're the most and Singapore, the two most vaccinated countries in the world, and they're having huge COVID outbreaks. And again, there was another Harvard study, which I featured on my show, which showed that the countries and the counties that have the highest vaccination rates also have very high transmission rates. So it's proving Dr. Robert Malone correct. I can hear a feedback. Is that a problem?
Yeah, I can hear a little bit of it, Jimmy. Can you hear it on my end?
I guess wherever it's yeah, I can hear it, whatever it is. Okay, now. Okay.
Joe.
So what it did was it proved Dr. Robert.
Go for it, Joe. I'm gonna look at this setup. Go for it, please, Joe.
Okay, so what it did was it proved it's still fucked up 100%. Maestro, are you gonna mute yourself?
Yeah, I'm on mute right now.
No, I can hear you. I can still hear you. You could. All right, now you're muted. Good. So what it did was it proved that Dr. Robert Malone was right, that you can't vaccinate your way out of this. And people are still reacting or acting as if you can, because that's what they're being told by the pharma-funded news agencies, that if everybody just gets vaccinated, we're going to get rid of this virus. We're not getting rid of this virus. An adult over 30 years old gets the flu twice a decade. That's the stats. You get the flu twice a decade. You're going to get the fucking COVID virus when it becomes like the flu, meaning it's going to become endemic and never go away. So you're going to get it. If you live long enough, you're going to get fucking COVID. And there's no amount of vaccines. And so what Robert Malone recommended on our show is how the way you deal with this is that you vaccinate the vulnerable, which is the people who are elderly and the people who are obese and the people who have comorbidities. You vaccinate those people, and then you let it circulate among the healthy, and then it becomes less deadly but more contagious. The way we're doing it, according to Robert Malone, Dr. Robert Malone, is if you vaccinate even the healthy, what happens is then the virus mutates and becomes more deadly instead of mutating to become less pathogenic and more contagious. And so, of course, we're handling it the wrong way. So I have a critique from the left about the establishment narrative on how to handle COVID. And there's no one else on the left doing it, so except maybe Max Blumenthal. And so I have a huge lane. And so, again, just like with Russiagate, everybody's too big of a pussy to call out the establishment narrative because they don't want to be seen as a Trumper or whatever they're afraid of. They're just cowards. Same thing with this. They don't have one question about the establishment's narrative around COVID or mandates or the vaccines. Not one fucking pushback, nothing. They're all a bunch of goddamn lemmings, which is why this country is turning into the fucking capitalistic and end stage capitalism hellscape that it's become.
Why are they so against the therapeutics too, Jimmy? They're like you said, they're pushing this vaccine above and beyond everything else. They're not concerned about people getting the antibodies and developing the herd immunity. Is it all about the money at the end of the day? Is that what it's all about when it comes to this vaccine?
I think it's 100% obvious that we have regulatory capture happening, and then we have also the media is captured by big pharma. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Yes, they're now going to, I just dropped a video about NBC News. They did a report about that child vaccines are available. They misrepresented the facts. They said 165,000 children. That's nuts. You know that children have a bigger risk from influenza than they have from COVID? That's a scientific fact. And so the idea that you have to vaccinate children is fucking nuts. And they used to say, well, you have to vaccinate children so they don't spread it to their grandparents. Well, what if their grandparents are vaccinated? Well, it doesn't matter anymore because they can spread it and get it. So they should be vaccinated, not the kids. So the kids can be vaccinated. They can still get COVID and they can still spread it. So there's no reason to fucking vaccinate kids whatsoever. And it's nuts that they're doing it. Again, if you go to that YouTube video of that NBC News report, it got ratioed to shit by people who watched it on YouTube. Yeah. Like literally like 6,000 downvotes to 600 upvotes. That's how bad it got ratioed. So people know, I think, that they're being fear-mongered to right now, which is why you see workers standing up against these mandates. That's right. Why don't they tell you about the therapeutics? Fauci is quoted as saying that monoclonals have an 85% effective rate of keeping you out of the hospital if you get them. Why don't they say that every day on the news? They don't say that, right? I guess there's not enough money in it for them. I guess Big Pharma doesn't want them to say that. So, and by the way, the demonization of ivermectin, for the news media, why would they have to lie about it? Why would they want to make you think that somehow ivermectin isn't a human medicine? Why would they do that? That's like saying that it's a horse medicine. It's like saying penicillin is a horse medicine because 80% of antibiotics are used in freaking farm animals. So when you see a propaganda campaign that is that big, that ubiquitous, you know that's Big Pharma pushing the buttons at there's only 6 media companies in the whole goddamn country. So it's not hard for them to monopolize it. And then you have to come to YouTube or places like this to get real information from it. And then 99% of the people who have YouTube channels are too big of pussies to fucking give a critique of it.
Yeah. What do you think Dr. Fauci's role in all this is? It seems like he's complicit, in my opinion.
100%. That guy's a criminal. I caught him lying 3 times about huge issues. He admitted to 2 of them. He admitted he lied about herd immunity. He admitted he lied about masks. What? In the middle of a pandemic, the guy, and somehow he's not fired? How is he still the head of the health response to COVID in this country? How can anybody trust anything he says? Plus, he lied a 3rd time when he said he didn't fund gain of function research. And he's still lying about that today.
Yeah.
The guy should be in jail for lying to Congress.
No, he absolutely is, Jimmy. And what's interesting to me is, look, I am double vaxxed. Joe's vaxxed. I remember earlier on they said we got to get vaxxed up so that you can essentially be a fully fledged human being in our society. No more masks for people that are vaccinated. Now it's nonstop wet mask wearing. I teach middle school, and today I had a bunch of kids out, and I'm asking the classmates, where are they today? They're getting vaxxed. And the thing is, I remember earlier on it was clear. Oh, children are mostly asymptomatic. Children usually don't, or pretty much don't ever get really sick unless they have, really severe pre-existing conditions. But now it's like mass vaxxed everything. I asked a colleague the other day, how long do you think we're going to be masked up like this? Do you think we're going to need to continuously get booster shots? What are the benchmarks we need to hit as teachers to kind of go back to teaching children that aren't wearing masks from behind masks that we're wearing ourselves? And the answer I got was, well, until all of the children get vaccinated. That's when. And, later on I go home, Jimmy, and I turn on your video and I see Max Blumenthal essentially reminding us that house cats, dogs, and zoo animals, let alone animals out there in nature, are also all susceptible to COVID and to spreading the virus, because obviously this is now a virus that spreads from animals to human beings thanks to gain of function research. So I want your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, it just goes to the point that Andy Slavitt, Biden's director of COVID response, said that we're all going to get it. And so why is everybody wearing masks if we're all going to get it? I don't get it. And the idea that children need to be vaccinated, that's a crime. And by the way, I'm double vaxxed too. I got the vax, and I believe that you should have. So by the way, what they're saying now for the boosters, actually, what the FDA actually said for the boosters, or what they were saying 5 minutes ago, was that you should vaccinate the vulnerable.
Yeah, comorbidities. Yeah.
And people with comorbidities. So if you have a 5-year-old kid who has cancer, you should vaccinate him. If you have a 5-year-old kid who's going to have a transplant surgery, you should vaccinate him. Virtually nobody else of the children should be vaccinated. You should vaccinate the vulnerable. So that's not anti-vax. Robert Malone, this is his advice. And that guy, they want to call him anti-vax. The guy's lived his whole life developing vaccines. He's working on a new vaccine right now. The guy couldn't be less vax. He's just telling you the truth about things. And so what this is called is a leaky vaccine. So all vaccines are leaky, meaning they don't give you 100% protection from getting or receiving a virus. But this one is really leaky, meaning now, no matter who's vaccinated, you can still transmit it just as easily as an unvaccinated person. So that, you tell me what's the scientific reason now for mandates. If we now know vaccinated people spread the virus, have just as big a viral load as unvaccinated people. Now, what is the point of that? There isn't a scientific point to that. So this is all about money, and I encourage those. And again, this is from an informed scientific and a lefty worker position. Richard Wolff made the case. We need the kind of worker militants that are willing to stand up against giving more power to the people who screwed up this mandate, this vaccine COVID response, meaning the establishment, the oligarchs. Like I said, you never hear Fauci talking about Medicare for all. If he was really serious about saving people's lives, don't you think at least once in a while he would go, if we had universal health care, we could have saved 200,000 people's lives. He's never mentioned that. He'll talk about every other fucking thing, 2 masks, 3 masks, 2 cartwheels, get 40 vaccines. He'll never tell you universal health care would save 200,000 lives. So that's how you know that guy's a corrupt piece piece of shit. And there's many other ways to tell that, by the way. The fact that he lied to Congress about funding gain of function is another way. And that he lied to you about masks. How many people died and got COVID because they didn't believe him or did believe him and took the wrong advice he gave them? So there's no reason for mandates, and we need the militancy of workers so willing to stand up. And Professor Wolf said, why are you pushing those people into right-wing camp? You don't have to do that. Those people aren't right-wingers. We need solidarity among workers to reject mandates from the people who already fucked up this COVID response.
Jimmy, I have an interesting question for you, because I was watching your show earlier and you were talking about Rob DeSantis in Florida, how they don't have the mandates, how they're a lot less stringent as a lot of these other states are, and they have like the lowest rate right now, right?
Yes.
So
they have. Go ahead.
So, well, as crazy as this may sound, do we have to look to the Republicans on this particular issue, and is this going to lose the Democrats election after election, and even the next presidential election? Is this going to be detrimental to the Democrats, and are actually the Republicans better on this than the Democrats, in your opinion?
It seems like the flex of the Democrats is to call anybody who pushes back against the narrative around COVID to discard them into the deplorable dustbin.
Yeah.
And you tell me how that worked the first time they did that. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so they're actually rejecting their natural base again, which is militant workers, which is supposed to be the Democrats' natural base. But again, I'll remind you of what Chuck Schumer said in 2015 when they were trying to ram Hillary Clinton down our throat. He didn't give a shit if he lost those voters. He said, for every blue collar worker we lose, we're going to gain a 2 or 3 white collar voters in Michigan. And you can repeat that. That's what he thought was going to happen in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, and Ohio, and Illinois, and that is not what happens. So they are pushing away their natural constituency. And, when I brought a Boogaloo Boy on my show, which people thought he was a racist Proud Boy, which is the exact opposite of a Proud Boy, they were formed in, so he's just a libertarian gun nut who is anti-war, anti-cop, and anti-Trump, and pro-Black Lives Matter and pro-LGBTQ. So those are the kind of people who were voting Democrat 25 fucking years ago. And the Democrats don't want to talk about how they lost those people. And that's what's crazy. So the Democrats are supposed to be the party of unions, and they're not. They're a party of mandates and authoritarianism. They're not standing up for those militant workers that are rejecting more power be given to their employer, which is where we're always supposed to be on the left. So that there again, the Democrats have become a right-wing fucking party. And yes, it seems like the only one standing up these days against these mandates is the militant workers, and they're pushing them into the arms of the right wing, which is, again, a horrible electoral strategy. Good for them. I tell people, come to the People's Party, because there's a new party we're starting. We just got registered in Florida. That's the first state we're on the ballot. So we hope to have a presidential candidate for 2024. And then we can get on a lot more ballots. But we're going to give people an alternative, and we're going to organize around issues, not around cultural fucking identity politics. Because let's remember what identity politics is. They don't solve the problem. They just appoint a person who looks like you to keep oppressing you. That's what identity politics is. So the joke I do, if it was 1860, the Democrats would be bragging about their first transgendered slave owner.
Yeah, and the election in Virginia basically speaks to everything you just said, right? Just right then and there. So
I heard
100%. They ran a right wing fucking ex banker, ex real estate mogul, ex Clinton campaign, and he lost to a nobody. People are done with the Democrats.
That was shocking. That was shocking.
I mean, you've got a lot of guests that I really appreciate hearing from. Max Blumenthal is probably at the top of the list. Obviously, Aaron Mate is another one. But you've got a guy that's coming on recently quite a bit that I think everybody needs to check out, and that's Nick Cruz from the Fred Hampton Leftists. And he made a really good point last time I saw him on your show, which is that easiest path to victory here is you offer people healthcare and payments. He made the point that the Trump and the Republicans could have easily won if they essentially gave out Medicaid. I actually think Medicaid is better than Medicare, so I'm going to say Medicaid for all. And called it freedom care, you know, or sent out payments to everyone and called it Patriot Pay. You know what I mean? It's quite unbelievable how dismissive they are, both parties, of the actual needs of workers, and the fact that they're so inclined to always be on the side of corporations. And like you've been saying, Jimmy, it's not one party, it's both parties that split into kind of red and blue. And really the only alternative, and reference
he's breaking up a little bit.
quote the guy from MSNBC, Lawrence fake tough guy O'Donnell, I think you call him, where he said the only thing you can do is prove to whoever you believe is closest to your political aspirations, you won't vote for them.
Until you are willing to demonstrate to whichever party you want to pull to your way of thinking that you are willing to withhold your vote, they won't listen to you. He said, I guarantee you, I worked in the Democratic Party. I never had to listen to the left because they had nowhere else to go. And that's why we have the country we have right now, because the people like Bernie Sanders and AOC take that progressive revolutionary energy and they funnel it back into a pro-Wall Street, pro-war party, anti-worker party where it meets a graveyard. And we're seeing that right now. There's just all that revolutionary energy that Bernie garnered in 2016 and again in 2019, 2020. It's all fucking gone. It's all, they don't use it. They throw it under the bus and they've sold us out. And we're getting crumbs once again. And our country slides into being more and more like Brazil every day. And so, yeah, you got to stop voting Democrat for at least one election cycle.
Joe?
Gotcha. No, I agree. I mean, it doesn't look good for the Democrats in these upcoming elections, man. It just doesn't. So I think that this is basically a result of what they're doing right now. You know, ramming these mandates down our throats, the masks, all this stuff. I mean, I got the vaccine because I was promised that it would bring us back to normalcy, and that was a lie. It was a lie, and I don't regret getting the vaccine, but I say to myself, was it a waste of time getting the vaccine? Because I'm slowly slipping back into these restrictions. I have to wear masks at work. I have to register my vaccine card at work, or I can't go to work. So what did I actually get out of this? You know, I'm still going to restaurants that I have to wear a mask in. Certain gyms you still got to wear a mask in. You know, I want there to be some light at the end of the tunnel, and I just don't see it.
I agree. And in a lot of ways, we'd be better off if we just had one party on the surface in America, because that's what we have on the underneath, because then we could hold them accountable. Now they get to play the game. Hey, it's his fault. Hey, it's his fault. So they go back and forth every election cycle, and things get worse and worse, which is why we have to stop voting for the problem and thinking it's going to get better. The reason why our country's fucked up, we have an exploding prison population. We're the largest penal colony in America, and kids are in student debt. People are the income disparity is the greatest since the Gilded Age. It's because of Joe Biden and his policies. And we elected him is he some kind of antidote to Trump? It's the people. That's what I don't know how much worse things have to get for people to realize that. But we're the most Nick Cruz says on my show all the time, we're the most propagandized country in the world, and people don't realize it. They really thought that Trump was the problem instead of a symptom of a problem.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And just to close up on this, Jimmy, I really thank you for the whole notion of blaming the worker, the boxer, for catching COVID. Blaming now I guess if anything happens in the NBA, the player, the unvaccinated, for the spread. And now the science is caught up to what I believed. And Jimmy, I want to thank you for coming on. Joe, thank you so much as well for being here. I want everybody to check out Dore. He does this multiple times a week, every week. Guys, you got to check out Jimmy and hear the message, hear the truth. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Well, let me just say before I say goodbye, I just want to remind everybody they want you to turn on your neighbor. Don't do that. I'm not going to let the oligarchy make me turn on a school aide, a nurse's aide, or a teacher or a bus driver because of COVID. They're not my enemy. My enemy is the oligarchy that is keeping healthcare and a living wage away from me.
Yeah, they got to stop shaming everyone that's not falling in line, and we got to respect each other's views. I agree with that 100%. Very, very well said, Jimmy.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate it. Talk
Thanks,
to you
Jimmy.
later.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you, Jimmy. Really appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.
All right. Nice to meet you both. Take care, brother.
All right, bye-bye.